So
now, due to those incidences, what do you think is the best way to respond? If we take, for example, in Britain, there's a lot of Muslims there, and there's a organization called the Runnymede Trust, which their way of combating Islamophobia is through reports. So they had a 20-person report that included 10 Muslims, 10 non-Muslims, and they asked, how does Islamophobia affect you, even as a non-Muslim? And that was their way of interacting both Muslim and non-Muslims, because they thought that was the way to combat xenophobia, to make it so everyone is in one group. Then there's another group in Britain who does the opposite, where they just take Muslims, that it's your problem, you have to deal with it, and the non-Muslims, they say, are part of the system that wants to oppress you, so you can't trust them. What do you think? Do you think it's entirely on the Muslims to combat this, or does non-Muslims also have to help Muslims to deal with this? Especially in St. Cloud, for example, like after Crossroads.
When I hear about this type of thing, I'm reminded right away of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam movement, where they would not allow white people to help them in any sort of activism. But then later on, Malcolm X had changed his opinion and said, everybody can come in and help. Once he kind of grew up and became more mature and those types of things in his ideology and thinking. And I would agree with that. I think this is something that has to be fought on all levels of society by all people. All forms of discrimination. It's not just Islamophobia, it's racism, it's sexism, it's heterosexism, it's all those things. Ableism, ageism.
Now, not only does xenophobia affect person to person, but for example, at Harvard, Dr. Derek Bell, a prestigious professor, talked about how it's systematic. And because it's systematic, not only will me to you and how we talk affect things and make so xenophobia goes away. He talks about how, for example, there's a mass incarceration rate of African Americans and minorities, and how that has to be taken care of either through some organization like CARE, which goes through laws, which is similar to liberal feminism in a way that goes through government agencies, or there's the opposite, which is a more radical approach, like you mentioned Malcolm X and the UN and genocide charges. Which way is more feasible to combat Islamophobia? Should we go more of like CARE, which is more, can include Muslims and non-Muslims, or do we go more towards a revolution per se?
If you're asking me, I think that this has to be a grassroots thing, just from person to person. You can change policy, but that don't mean people are going to change the way they think or the way they treat other people. And that's just the reality. They'll just complain about this stupid policy the whole time, So I think, it's just talking to people, becoming friends with people. I think the best way to fight prejudice of any kind is just to immerse yourself with different people. If you don't know any Muslim people or you're not friends with any Muslim people, hey, go to your local, shop or a Middle Eastern shop or something. Try to become friends with somebody. Try to get to know somebody, and then you might learn a lot, and your experience might change your views. And then of course, self-education is always very important, and it's also very important to stand up to Islamophobia if you see it happening in front of you, to report it. To agencies like CARE or even the NAACP, they handle that type of stuff, and they are active here in St. Cloud too. And also, let's say someone's just saying a bunch of slurs to somebody, getting in their face and being very mean and disrespectful to them. Maybe you could just simply start small talk with the victim of that harassment and ignore the person. And a lot of times that works very well. If they get threatening or intimidating in any way, the best thing to do is just call law enforcement. And it's good, to talk about to your family, to your kids about Islamophobia. Make sure that they report bullying in school. As we know, there was a protest at the Tech High School here in St. Cloud because of Islamophobic bullying that's been happening. I also volunteered and was a teacher's assistant in the ESL class at the Apollo High School for about 6 months as part of one of the classes that I took here at SCSU. And you witness Islamophobic bullying happening, in the hallways, in between classes. So this stuff is real, it happens. The teachers that are good, they do what they can, but they only have so much control in that area. And many of the victims of Islamophobia, they can't stand up to it alone, especially if the perpetrator is in a position of authority, as they often are. So, standing up for other people is very, very important. And know that, these racial slurs, Islamophobic slurs, they often can escalate into violence and even death. So take them seriously. The same people who says a slur the next day might punch somebody. And so forth. So I think organizing interfaith groups too is also very important to bring about a mutual understanding and to show all the similarities that the major world religions have. And most of them have the same core values. They just maybe have different ways of implementing it or thinking about it and that type of thing. So I think those are very important and practical.